Thank you, Omar. So, nous connaissons haïtien mieux, right? So we have to start with on respect. So when I say on, if you want to respond in kind, you should say respect. On, on, thank you. My name is Winnie Lamore, and I'm the Managing Director of the Haitian Creole Language Institute of New York. And I'm also the Haitian Creole instructor here at CLACS, the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies at NYU. It's been a really exciting time for me here at NYU as I've been able to bring a little bit of Haiti to a space that traditionally hasn't been open to, a space that hasn't traditionally been open to in inclusivity. So it's been nice to be part of a department that's all about including cultures that are super, super important, especially Haitian culture, which paved the way for so much in the Caribbean. I started the Mother Tongues United event sort of on a whim a couple of years ago. I have no idea how it came to me, but I'm obsessed with language. I always tell people that language is my activism. It's my entry point into reconnecting with IET. It's my entry point into advocating for myself as a Haitian American and advocating for others in my community. So Mother Tongues United was a way for me to bring together different language communities because I was curious. I'm a Sag, so we're all about learning all the time for no reason, just to learn. So I was curious how other language communities in the Caribbean were dealing with their own issues with their own languages. And so the first Mother Tongues United focused on 3 language communities, Creole, Creole Haïtien, Papiamentu, which is a Dutch-based Creole, and Garifuna. So that was really exciting. And then it kind of morphed into thinking about other French-based Creoles in the Caribbean. And we find ourselves here at the 3rd iteration of Mother Tongues United, which will focus on children's literature in the Caribbean. And so I put on events like this primarily to share knowledge and really provide a space where we can have really difficult conversations about difficult topics, but also to press myself to do things that I think are important. So I'm currently trying to put together a children's curriculum. So this was my way of sort of diving into, well, what are the children doing in the Caribbean, or who's working on behalf of the children in the Caribbean? So here we are, here you are with me on this kind of wacky journey through language and activism and figuring out where my space is and who I am as a person and where language plays a role in all of that. So tonight I'm joined by 3 really wonderful women. I somehow find myself surrounded by Black women all the time, which I love. They nurture me and help me be better. So I appreciate all of you for being here tonight. So we have 3 panelists with us tonight. Immediately to my left here is Keisha Wiel. Keisha Wiel is a 3rd-year doctoral student in the Department of Anthropology at Temple University in Philadelphia. So she came all the way up from Philly to be with us tonight. Her research focuses on different language ideologies around the Creole language Papiamentu. Okay, thank you, Keisha, for being here. We have our second panelist, Riva Précil. Riva is the author of Anaëlle and The Mermaid, a wonderful children's book written in her native tongue of Haitian Creole. So it's actually on sale tonight if you want to check it out. It's in the lobby. Definitely support Riva and her work. She is also an accomplished musician, singer, artist, all-around creator. She just creates, and everything that she does focuses on IET. So Riva, thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, my woe, my boo, is Carmel Balan. Carmel is the founder of Port Academie, which is an online digital library that houses wonderful digital resources that focus on Haitian scholarly work and Haitian studies. And it's the one place online where you can find anything that you need related to IET as it relates to the academic world. So Carmel, thanks so much for being here with us tonight. Should we dive right in?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, let's do that. Oh, yes. I encourage, we're all about social media. So the title of tonight's event is purposefully #Mother Tongues United, so that you know where to find us online, you know who to share it with, and that people can find us. So I'm encouraging our panelists, I'm encouraging the audience to tweet, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, what else is there? What did I leave out? Snapchat. I'm not on the Snap. I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm all about those Insta stories. So if you want to do an Insta story, please feel free to do so. As long as you use the #Mother Tongues United. And our second hashtag is actually the theme of my work this academic year at NYU, which is #Recentering Blackness. So I'm just going to let that settle right there. So if you want to also #Recentering Blackness, I do encourage you to do so. All right. Oh, I said a lot. Should I let y'all do some talking now?
Sure.
Can I ask you some questions? Oops. All right. I'm going to ask you some questions. So the first question that I'd like to start with has to do with space. I always tell people this. I'm obsessed with the idea of space. I consider I was born in IUT but raised in Brooklyn. So I consider myself Haitian American. So I occupy multiple spaces, but no space at all. So I'm in this sort of in between. And I'm always thinking about, well, how do I remain connected to IUT from a distance? Because I'm not always there. And the way I remain connected is through language. So I want to talk to you about bonds. How important is language in maintaining a bond for you to your culture? There are mics, plenty of mics.
Well, I guess I'll start then. So how is language used as a bond to maintain to our culture? It's interesting, because personally for me, I wasn't born either in Aruba and Curacao. I was born in New York, in Queens. And I grew up in New York City. And for us in the diaspora, the Dutch Caribbean diaspora, there's so few of us compared to you guys from Haiti or to Jamaicans or whatever other Caribbean island. You know, I mean, we were sort of this tight-knit group, and a lot of it centered around our ideas about culture and what our culture stood for. Because I tend to say that we from the Dutch Caribbean are fluid in that sense. We have this sort of fluid identity where, because, you know, to the south of us you have, especially from the ABC Islands, you have Latin American influence, and then the rest of the Caribbean that surrounds us, we sort of have this identity where we can kind of blend in wherever we go. And, you know, I think that's the importance of Papiamentu for our culture, is this idea that helps us stand out a little bit more, because we do have sort of that fluid identity where, you know, we will go to the salsa parties and the compa parties and dance hall.
You go to compa parties?
I did in high school. Yes.
Okay.
You know, and that was a way for us to sort of stand apart in that sense. Was knowing our culture and being immersed in it and speaking our language. That was something. And even for those of us who grew up here who didn't necessarily know how to speak our language, we understood it and we embodied it in that sense. So that was for me how sort of we grappled with how language was tied to identity for us.
Beautiful. Oh, let me grab this. Well, first of all, I love what you said about space. Very interesting. I was wondering where you were going with that when you said you were obsessed with space. Because I myself was born here in New York. My mother is American and my father is Haitian, but we moved to Haiti when I was 5, which is a really great age for children to pick up a language. So I learned Creole at 5 and French a few years after that, and moved back to the United States at 15. that's a very sensitive age to kind of have an entire cultural shift. At 5, it's kind of like, oh, whatever, we're moving around. But as a teenager who's already kind of established establishing their identity, it was a very difficult time for me to have that shift. So Creole for me has always been a really big part of maintaining that piece of that identity itself. Also, I find that when you meet a Haitian person and you tell them they're Haitian, their first question is, "Parle Creole?" "Parle Creole mo." So you have to essentially prove yourself immediately, and if you have the slightest accent, it's like, just follow you're discredited. So first and foremost, for credibility, I find that it's very important. You need it. You will not get away with not being fluent in Creole. And also the importance of it, I think in Haiti is very stressed because there's such a huge battle of French and Creole, and a lot of friends of mine who were 100% Haitian, who were born and raised, some of them only spoke French. So to me, as a newcomer, that seemed like something that was a little bit backwards. So I always make it a point to have Creole in my back pocket. Thank you.
I'm a bit nervous, so please be a little patient with me.
Can we give Carmel a round of applause for her nervousness?
Thank you. Creole was actually the first language that I learned at home. So it was my first language. Till this day, no one believes that I was born here because it was a way for me to bond with my grandmother, you know, my uncles, my aunts, and everyone else. So I started going to Haiti at the age of 2 and was always excluded from, you know, jouing, I said jouing. Jouing a Creolish word. No, but playing woosle, or just, you know, interfacing with them. So for me, it was bonding with my family. And getting there, and Riva said it, just having them accept me. Because as a Haitian American, you're, you know, casted as the diaspora. You don't know how it is for us to live. So a lot of my conversations with them was making them feel or accept me as a Haitian as well. And fast forward now, I'm too Haitian. So that was how I use Creole to bond with family, and even now with friends, and Winnie can attest to this. If I'm in the group with, and some of my friends are here, if I'm with them and they're all Haitian, Creole. Because there are some jokes that you can say in English and then Creole, and it's totally different.
So all 3 of you mentioned this idea of acceptance and being part of a community, and one of the main reasons why I really started thinking about this idea of mother tongues united and using that term very purposefully, mother tongues, is to think about what does it mean to be a speaker of a historically undervalued language. So a historically undervalued language is defined as a language that suffers from systemic, social, and cultural degradation. So it means its speakers are often shamed for speaking that language, and Creole Haitien falls under that, Papiamentu falls under that category. And I want to hear from all of you. Have you ever been shamed for speaking your language? If so, how did it fuel the work that you do today? Take your time. It's a heavy question.
Growing up here, you know, there was a stigma growing up, you're Haitian. So yes, I was, you know, or the reverse, going to Haiti and my career wasn't, you know, up to par, so to speak. But growing up with a grandmother that was so passionate about culture and language, I was never ashamed. Although there were forces, if you will, trying to make me ashamed of being Haitian, of speaking Creole, I loved my culture. So that was something to me that it was never, you know, I'm not going to speak Creole and I'm ashamed of being Haitian.
Yes, is the first answer. Shamed constantly. Well, first of all, in my music, some of you know, I released an album last year, and I intentionally wanted it to be an exclusively Creole album, because that was a way for me to sort of dedicate it to my culture, to what's nearest and dearest to my heart. And then later on I could always, you know, have a jazz album, have an R&B album, that can all come. But the foundation, it needs to pay respects to my ancestors and to, you know, what makes up the fabric of my identity. But many people during the process of creating that album said, well, you have such an advantage. You speak English so clearly. Why would you throw that away and sing in Creole? That just seems so like... Exactly. So I mean, initially would be very upset and offended by that concept, because how can you even continue a conversation like that with someone who already feels that you're putting yourself at a disadvantage? I mean, yes, we are the minority, and obviously Creole music is not mainstream, but the sentiment behind it is easily misunderstood. Same thing with the book. When I was writing the Anaëlle and it was because there was such a lack of any literature for children in Creole, and Haitians particularly would suggest, like, why would you not write it? I went to an illustrator who I met in Haiti, and he was amazing. I loved his work, and I wanted to work with him. And the first meeting that we had when we sat down was about my vision, what the story was about, and what I wanted to do. And he said, Creole, you're writing a poor man's book. Why would you write in Creole? I was like, all right, thanks so much. It's great to meet you. I'll be finding someone else to work with, because clearly not in the same school of thought. So all the time, constantly, in all of the work that I do, as long as it has to do with Creole or embracing the roots of Haiti, it's always questioned. And that's why I fight so hard to continue along those lines, because it's so frequently shunned or shut down or just frowned upon. But I don't let that deter me from, you know, keeping on.
Yeah, it's interesting, because for me, I remember my elementary school was predominantly Haitian American kids, and you know, I do remember the stigma that was geared towards a lot of the Haitian American kids, and I remember, I guess, thinking in terms of that and how we were sort of envisioned. And for us, you know, nobody knew where our islands were. Nobody knew what language we spoke. I remember once being on the phone with a friend and my mom saying something to me, and I responded back, or in Papiamentu or in English, I can't remember how I responded back. And I remember my friend just telling me, like, what is that? What is that, some type of Spanish you guys are speaking? And I remember at the time just feeling like, well, you know, I'm 11 or so, I don't have time to explain what this is. So I'm just gonna be like, you know, and I just said, yeah, that's what it is, and, you know, just kept the conversation going. And as I look back on my childhood, I realized that a lot of it was this idea of, because we come, you know, because my parents come from islands that are so small that not a lot of people know anything about them, I was constantly explaining, as you know, from a young age, what my language is, what my culture is, you know. And I think that sort of took a toll on me, where it became a point where I remember, you know, my sister and I, we didn't really speak it at home. So our parents would speak to us in Papiamentu, and then we would answer back in English a lot. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that, I don't know necessarily if we were ashamed, but it was just sort of this idea of, we don't want to have to put that burden on a child. I mean, even our teachers would be like, oh, well, where is that? What is that? What are you guys speaking? It was something that drained you after a while. And I remember, I think the first time I actually started to place some sort of acceptance and pride, not only within my culture, but in the language specifically, was I think my senior year of high school, when I was starting to learn not only about Black American history and ideas of Blackness, but also I was like, okay, well, what is my history? My parents didn't come and grow up in the United States. My parents grew up down there. What is my history? I realized that my history was apart from the rest of the Caribbean, even though it was this idea of like we wanted to fit in. And I think that was the main thing for us, was that growing up, in particular for me, I'll speak for myself, we didn't know where to fit in, and that's where that fluid identity comes from. Like I said, because we were such a small community, it was this idea of like, well, nobody's from the Dutch Caribbean, so do we fit in with the Latinos? Do we fit in with the English Caribbean or the French Caribbean? Where do we go? So I think it wasn't until, like I said, my senior year of high school and then going into college where I sort of actually started to embrace my language and wanted to know more about it and know more about my history. And it was through that I really sort of found my identity in that sense. For instance, I think when it was, maybe my freshman year of college, and I had this professor who said, oh, well, if you're from the Caribbean, I know this other professor who's doing Creole work in Grenada. He's working on the French Creole that's dying out in Grenada. You should totally meet him. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. So I went and, we started talking, and he was just like, oh, you're from Aruba and Curacao, so you speak Papiamentu? And I was like, yeah, sure, I speak that thing, so what, yeah. And he was just like, that's just so amazing, like, and he started ranting and raving about this language, and I was just like, okay. And that, I think, was the first time that I actually started to think seriously about that language, of what it meant and how powerful it was. And it was because of that meeting that I am where I am today, like having taken pride in that and sort of realizing, no, I should be promoting this, I should be working on this.
There's a story that I always like to tell about when I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade. Some of y'all probably have already heard this, but I had only been in the States for a couple of years, and my English was, children learn English very fast, but I hadn't yet learned the English word Haitian. And for some reason, it had not clicked in my head as an English word that I could remember. But I remember one of my classmates coming up to me and asking me, are you Haitian? And I didn't know what she was asking me. I just heard "are you" and then blank word in my mind. But I could feel the feeling behind the way she said Haitian. Like as a child, children are super receptive to emotion. So right off the bat, I was like, I don't know what she's asking me, but I don't want to be that. And I kind of held on to that for a long time, despite how we were raised at home. I didn't reconnect with Creole until I was a little bit older, as I was also trying to connect more with family and trying to figure out my identity as someone who didn't quite fit in all the spaces that I had been moving around in. I just didn't fit. So Creole was where I fit, and Haitian was where I fit. So thank you for those stories. As we think about the shame and the stigma attached to the languages that we speak respectively, I want to talk about how things are shifting. I want to talk about how things are changing in a way that more positively promotes Creole and Papiamentu. And I purposely wanted to focus on children's literature because I feel, when I think back to my experience as a child, I would have loved to have seen a book on Creole. I would have loved to have seen some materials, because I lived at the library. If I had seen some stuff on Creole, it would have made my experience as a young girl growing up in the States of Haitian heritage, a much different experience. So let's first talk about what are some movements or changes or shifts that you are happening now with your respective languages or language communities that are helping to move us all in a more positive direction and promoting a more positive image of our respective languages.
I definitely sense that there's a wave right now of positive representation of Creole and Haitian culture. When I wrote Anaëlle and no, it's not true. After the earthquake, my mom and I and my sister, we created this program which provided children with books to read. Basically, we trained a group of people who would go into the camps and read to the children who were displaced after the earthquake. However, the biggest issue was finding books that were in Creole from Haiti. We found ourselves translating, like, I don't know, Clifford the Big Red Dog, or, you know, Madeline, things that the references had nothing to do with the Haitian kids. And we were very careful with what we selected, not to include anything too traumatic or anything completely unrelated. But I thought that was very weird that there weren't any books for children where they could see themselves in the book or recognize a cultural reference or see, like, you know, something that is familiar to them. So when I wrote the book, it was in 2013, it was because I couldn't find anything. I mean, obviously we have dictionaries and there are plenty of poetry books in Creole and lots of plays, but specifically for children, I wasn't able to find much. But now I'm able to find more. Just recently I was on Amazon and it was like suggesting these books, and it was something about, like, or no, maybe it was like this Subjumu book that's coming out that I'm so excited about, or like this other, like, Jean-Jacques avec whoever, go to the Citadelle. That is making me so happy. I'm so happy to see those things. And perhaps it could be a number of things that's influencing this wave again that everyone is riding, which I love, but perhaps it might be social media, and it's maybe inspiring one another to, like, get excited about, like, you know, oh my God, like, I love that idea, let me, you know, create something that speaks to my experience. So I do see it. I see certain Instagram pages that, like, post a Creole word a day, and then they'll have, like, the phonics, and then they'll, like, use it in a phrase. I know that you do that, Winnie. A lot of my very cool friends have, like, their captions, and it's like like a Creole proverb. I love that, like, you know, like, Creole parler, Creole comprendre, and, like, that's the photo caption. So things like that, I'm loving that it's becoming more of a cool thing to do and more accepted, and that we as Haitians, we're the ones, because a lot of times it's the foreigners who are really giving it value and recognizing it, and who are, you know, taking the material and creating their own thing. So it's really great to see that within our own community, especially the younger generation, that they're understanding that we have to do this work, otherwise other people will be doing it on our behalf.
In Port Academie, my mission is to bridge the gap between education and technology. So, just to add to what Riva just said, the more children's books are available as ebooks. And in impoverished neighborhoods, you know, bookstores, they don't really exist. So in Port Academie, my goal is to have those ebooks available, readily available, so that parents can, you know, download them. It's right at their fingertips. And it's especially good for social learning. You know, a child that's balancing both American culture and Haitian culture, or a parent that's hoping to introduce Haitian culture to their kids, if they don't have the time to go to a to go to a physical library or bookstore, in Port Academie, I'm hoping that they're ebooks. And the unique thing about Port Academie is that it's focused on everything Haiti. So rather than going to Amazon or Barnes and Noble's website, I'm hoping that it's that one place that that's where I can find academic or educational material on Haiti. So it brings me great pleasure that some of these books are available as ebooks. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a corpus of literature in Aruba and Curacao Bonaire for a while. I want to say, maybe by the 1950s, 1960s, we really started seeing people who were taking pride in their language and in their culture and sort of producing these texts to not only just have something for the youth, but also have something for the general population. But as I'm seeing now, I want to say that there is sort of a big corpus of literature. There has been for a while, and a lot of it is mainly translation. We do have, text of our own. There's a lot of artists on the island, a lot of literary artists, a lot of authors, poets who are doing some great things. For example, there's this one girl, Roosevelt Ellis in Aruba, who, she's a poet, and she just came out with a book, and she had her nephew do the title cover, and her nephew was 2 or 3, something like that. So it's really sort of the way that she's been presenting this book really sort of inspired these people. And I remember seeing that, and the reason why I'm bringing her up is because I remember seeing that there was this little girl, I don't know, maybe between the ages of 5 and 7, who loved her poems so much in Papiamentu, she memorized one of her poems completely, and not just the poems, but in the mannerisms that Roosevelt presents her work. And once Roosevelt found out, she had this girl come up on stage with her, and they performed the poem together. And and I think that that's something that's profound, because how are we socializing our children to think about our languages? If we don't produce literary works, what are we telling them? That what they speak, what their parents speak, what their grandparents speak is not valuable. Mm-hmm. But putting works in our own language, having value in it, presenting it in ways that spark these imaginations of these children, I think that's really sort of something powerful. Mm-hmm. And not only that, like I said, there's a lot of translation going on. For example, they've translated the Diary of Anne Frank into Papiamentu. So how does that story reflect within that Papiamentu consciousness, particularly because, we were a Dutch colony. Mm-hmm. Anne Frank lived in the Netherlands, so her story of being oppressed by our colonizer, basically, how does that relate to us? Mm-hmm. And that was something that, I really found it's profound, and it's because of the great work that's being done by Fundación para Planificación de Idioma, which is Foundation for Language Planning, and all these other places like Unoca and Aruba, and they're making sure that kids have this corpus of literary works that they can go to if they want to. So it's great to see that. Yeah.
I just want to add something. Sitting next to Riva, her book, I was so excited to see the title.
I was so hyped about your book.
Yeah.
Me too. It's brilliant.
Language is an introduction to culture. Mm-hmm. Books are an introduction to culture as well. And to speak about a topic that a lot of Haitians are also not comfortable with, mm-hmm. and writing it regardless says a lot about you, and trying to bridge that gap. So making sure that there are books available on every topic also is very important. I'm just so proud of it, and if you can tell us more about Anaëlle Précil and the reason why. I'm so sorry, I know you're facilitating.
No, I'm all about community facilitation.
But it's something I personally haven't seen a book like it, and kudos to Rodney.
Oh yeah, illustrator.
For illustrating the book. But it's, again, not something that you often see. It's not a topic that you often see. So you can speak more about that.
What is the topic? Sorry.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Rodney, can you stand up for us, please? Let's give it up for Rodney Sanon, who illustrated the book. Beautiful, beautiful illustrations. He really helped me bring my vision to life in the greatest way. So as I said before, being of mixed descent, I think that sort of gave me sort of like a carte blanche to explore Haitian culture freely as a little girl. Whereas some of my friends who were, native were not exposed to certain things or weren't allowed to talk about certain things, and it was like very taboo for them to even acknowledge certain things. So I was very inquisitive when I would hear certain stories when I was a little girl. A little boy, a neighbor of mine, told me this story, and he told me that one time his dad was drowning and that a mermaid came and kissed air into his mouth and he swam back up. And I said, maybe he lost oxygen and he was hallucinating. Are you sure it was a mermaid? Like, come on. He's like, no, tout bon, it's true. You can ask anyone. So I remember I actually went home and I wrote a short story. I had like short stories as a little girl, and I wrote this whole story based on my imagination and what he had described. But again, like I was trying to, come up with a scientific explanation and the impossibility of there being like life underwater. But to answer your question, the book is about a little girl who loses her hat at sea, and then she goes on this underwater quest to find her hat. But obviously there are lots of voodoo references or mythical references that are part of Haitian culture that everyone knows about. Not everyone will discuss it or acknowledge it or embrace it, but it's beautiful. The imagery is amazing. Like we have this concept of having a marché en bas, which means like a market underneath. So it's like an entire marketplace where you can buy all these special goods. And the story goes that if you ever meet a mermaid, and she saves your life, that basically you'll owe her certain items. So she'll send you back to shore to bring her back, like, a comb or like a beautiful, gold pendant or whatever it is. So I wanted to write the book, not to say this is real and this is how it happens. It kind of like leaves it up to the reader at the end. It's like whether she was dreaming or whether it was her imagination. That's up to the reader to determine, and then that can open a discussion between the parent and the child, because I'm not here to advocate what's real or not. But I just felt that it was important to see those cultural references, because everyone knows of La Sirène, La Baleine, and even our songs speak of those things, and many Haitians know those songs and sing along to them, but then when it comes to actually opening a dialogue about it, it's like, uncomfortable, or it's just shut down. So I felt not only was it important to have a body of work in Creole, but also to have certain cultural references that are not discussed. And I'm so happy that I got to realize it. I'm so happy that I had my mother's support and my friends who were supportive of the story. And Movelino, actually, who's here with me, my amazing boyfriend who was here, he helped me with the Creole, because that's another thing, is that we are still working on the structure of Creole, and it's always a debate. And I went to school in Haiti. In 6th grade, I had to take what we call a certificat. It's like a certified exam. And I learned Creole a certain way, but Movilino learned Creole a slightly different way. So our writing is different. Some people don't use the apostrophe. Some people hyphenate things. It's like all over the place. We're working on having a uniform way, and the way that it's written in the book actually was edited by the publishing house. Remind me of the name right now. Educa Vision, thank you. Educa Vision, the founder, the CEO of Educa, actually wrote the very first Haitian dictionary, like a legit large body of work. So I, sat with him and we went back and forth and I debated with him, like, well, I learned that this, and it's beautiful that we are working towards a better structure, although it's also painful that we're still at this point where like it's just a free-for-all, people just writing things however they see fit. And it kills me that people still write like moin, M-O-I-N, or M-O-U-I-N, because it's M-W-E-N. So I'm very big on also like Haitian grammar, and Movilino was very helpful with like bouncing different vocabulary words, and it was a big debate. Rodney was there for many of those. We're like sitting arguing about but it's true, we learned it differently. So it's like, what is right and wrong? But I thank you, Carmel. Carmel actually was one of the first to post my book on her portal, and I was so proud to have it there. Although it's not available electronically yet, because my vision when I wrote the book was to have it available to kids in Haiti who could because many kids don't have tablets or laptops, but obviously that's a great outlet for kids here. But my goal, like my thinking, was to just have it paperback light. They could just throw it in their bag. But I would love to have it available online as well. Yeah, thanks for that.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for that. I think that it's important to. I want to piggyback off of what you just said about Creole and how it's kind of a free-for-all. So I started off this whole conversation talking about space, and I'm sort of obsessed with space. How do I occupy space as a Haitian woman, as a Haitian American, as a Black woman, as someone who's kind of, all over the place, as a Sagittarius. So I'm obsessed with this idea of space, and so I'm always thinking about how do I use my obsession to help positively promote Haitian Creole. And the way I do that is by teaching Creole in a very structured way. So I'm also really big on Haitian Creole grammar, and not just because I'm a prescriptivist. I'm not someone who's like, well, you should always say this, because that's not, I'm also very fluid, and I say whatever you want to say it. However you want to speak. But there needs to be a space where Creole is acknowledged as a language that has structure, and a language that can be used in academic spaces, a language that can be used to teach young children how to speak proper Creole. And it's so hard to do that with adults. And I think that children's literature is the way it is really the entryway into creating healthier conversations about, well, what role does Creole play in our languages, especially as a mother tongue? Because tout Haïtien connaît, all Haitians know, when you're upset, Creole, when you're happy, Creole, when you're with your plus one, Creole. I mean, we're not talking about none of that French tutu, that's not, it's Creole. So we have to understand, like, well, if this is our mother tongue, if this is what we are emotionally connected to, then what does that mean for how we engage in our communities? How are we engaging with younger children? And how are we giving them the tools? Are we giving them the tools to be able to continue positively promoting their language and existing in a space where they don't feel shame or stigmatized or, blurred because other people don't know how to X, Y, and Z? And I'm going to give a quick example of my little niece, Nana. she's the love of my life. Although there's another baby nephew now, so he's the new love of my life. But Nana is of Peruvian and Haitian descent, and so she's exposed to all languages at home. And what I love about Nana is she's 2.5 now, and she is all about, she knows her little Creole words, but she will correct you when she decides that you said the wrong word. And so I just give this example when I said to her, Nana, do you want some water? I made the mistake of talking to her in English. That was my first mistake. I said to her, Nana, do you want any water? And she goes, no, blow. I said, oh, okay. All right, blow is the word for water on Creole. And so children are it. Children's literature is where we can create those spaces where we can start to shift that narrative and really push Creole and all Creoles, but push historically undervalued languages into a space where we can view them more positively, both as the speakers ourselves and also from the outside.
Yeah, I just want to add something quick, because to hear you guys talk about Creole structure and sort of not just the correct way, but sort of valuing this language. And I think that's the important idea, is this notion of how to, oftentimes our languages get compared to, for a lack of a better term, more well-established languages, right? So English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, whatever. And it's this idea of like, because they're stigmatized, because they're always placed against these languages, we're always sort of trying to push, like, no, we do speak a real language. This is what it is. And it's really sort of political in that aspect, because for us, down in the ABC Islands, we have 2 orthographies. And that's where things get a little murky for us, because, and a lot of the reasons, the big reasons why we have 2 orthographies is not necessarily because there were 2 different ways of speaking Papiamentu, but it was literally because of politics. Aruba has their own, and Curacao and Bonaire has their own. I'm not going to debate and say which one is right. I do have my own ideas about it, but I don't want to put those out there. That's, personal conversations.
With everybody in the auditorium.
But, it's this idea of, well, no, we speak the right Papiamentu, as opposed to, no, well, we speak the right Papiamentu because we speak it this way and you guys sing it. And that word is wrong because this word is right, or this is the way a Curacao speaks versus this is the way an Aruban speaks. And all the way down to the orthography, that gets contested. And it's really interesting to hear about Haitian Creole because, this is my territory, so I've been researching, I haven't researched extensively Haitian Creole, but, Papiamentu and Haitian Creole, because we're the only 2 languages that have official status,
Yes.
both of them are always brought up in the conversation.
Yes.
In whatever article that you read, when it comes to that, those 2 languages are always brought up. And, to hear about us sort of thinking about ways of how to make it as official as possible, it really has a lot to do with, I want to say it all goes back to this idea of identity and sort of nation building in that sense. Because I remember, when I was doing my master's research and going a little bit into my pre-doctoral dissertation research, one of the things that people always told me was that, well, Papiamentu that's our identity marker for us. So we can be from anywhere. We have a lot of immigrants that are in Aruba and Curacao. And, the one thing that they say across racial lines, class lines, economic lines, social lines, is, oh, well, if you speak Papiamentu, that makes you an Aruban, that makes you a Yucatao, which means, a Curaçaoan. And I think that's powerful in that sense. But at the same time, it's the parents who sort of fight back against that orthography, saying, well, we always wrote it like this. I don't understand why we have to sit there and learn to write it this way. This way is too hard. And, I don't want to put an indictment on all adults on the islands. There are plenty of people, plenty of parents and adults who do take pride in making sure that their kids know how to write, the proper orthography. But yeah, where that's happening is really in schools, because they put it as a language class for them to take in the elementary school level. These kids, you have a generation of kids who are growing up learning how to write the official orthography, whereas, you know, we're starting to phase out the people over a certain age who still kind of just write it the way they want to, because, you know, I guess, to be honest, for some people, it's not that it's too hard for them, it's just that they don't want to, you know, they don't want to learn, and they might have a lot of pride in their language, but it's this idea of like, I have a lot of pride because it's my cultural identity, but when it comes to something serious of like learning physics or being able to speak another language through my own language to get far, you know, to get economic success, my language is not worth it. So I'm not going to put the effort and the time into learning the correct orthography, into learning sort of the correct way to say things, you know. And I think that's the conversation that sort of needs to be had, because, you know, as I said before, children are being socialized to think about these ideologies and being within in those roles where when they go to school and, you know, they're in that Papiamentu class and they're like, well, why do we have to learn this? You know, what are they getting at home? What are they getting on the streets? What are they getting from their own teachers?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's sort of something that, you know, we as scholars, we're starting to think about a lot.
My favorite critique of Creole Haitien is, oh well, you know, it's not a language you can use on the global stage. It's not, you know, it's not a viable language. Too. And my response is, so Creole is spoken by 8 to 10 million people in Haiti alone, not to mention the millions that are in the diaspora. So ça veut dire tout le monde qui parle créole, they don't matter. It's so glaringly obvious, you know, obvious. It's almost like what you're saying is what you've been socialized to say. And so I always remind my students, I remind people who say things like that to me, that it is political. It is very much, you very much make a statement when you decide to write a children's book on Creole, when you decide to focus a website on Haitian studies. You know, that's a political statement, and you're saying you're staking claim in a space where you have not been allowed to stake that claim. So I think it's super important to continue to encourage more children's materials to be produced on Creole, because I think that children's literature is really where we can see that shift happen. And when you look at social media and the internet. First of all, I love the internet. I don't know about you all, but I'm with someone who's obsessed with memes, so I get memes all the time. But the internet is literally the collective consciousness of everybody. It's like everybody, all the wittiness, the clever. It's like it's one huge human brain is the internet. So when you look at Haitian Twitter, for example, which is not as popular as Black Twitter, but we're getting there. There's power in language. There's power in seeing other people use Creole online. But it also speaks volumes that Creole is a language that Haitians are using, that young Haitians are using. C'est pas français à utiliser, comprends? So, I mean, that says everything already about the importance of the mother tongue, and that Creole is our mother tongue. So I'm going to ask one last question before I open it up to the audience. Keisha, you mentioned very briefly that Haitian Creole and Papiamentu are the only two officially recognized Creole languages in the Caribbean. I mean, I think this is amazing. I don't know about y'all, I think this is amazing. It says a lot about the influence of the people who engage in this, you know, sort of political campaign to get these languages to be official. But I think it also speaks to what's happening on the ground in the Caribbean. So what does it mean, and I'll open this up to all of you, what does it mean for you to speak a language that's historically undervalued, but also recognized as an official language of your country? And what are you seeing in terms of movements or campaigns or programs on the ground that have been sort of bolstered by the official language status?
Well, I'll start. It's interesting because right now there's sort of this big debate going on. I mean, this debate has been going on for a while, but it's sort of making waves. It's this constant idea of like, well, should we put the language as the language of instruction and education? You know, that's always has been there. And, you know, as I said before, Haiti and in particular Aruba and Curacao are really sort of the only ones who have that privilege. You know, I know that we don't talk about our languages as having a privilege often because they're so marginalized, but when we tend to look at other Caribbean Creole languages, we tend to forget that we are in a privileged sense, because we can have these conversations of, oh yeah, should we seriously put this as the language of instruction? And right now on the islands, unfortunately there's this debate about, well, yeah, we should put Papiamentu in education, but we should put English as the language of instruction because English is this globalizing language. So we want to get rid of Dutch because, you know, Dutch, it was always this idea of like, oh, well, we're going to go far with Dutch, but the reality is, I mean, how many people speak Dutch, you know? Outside of the Netherlands, how many people speak Dutch? And even in the Netherlands right now, many of the universities are switching to English. Mm-hmm. So, you know, for the longest, and you still have a lot of politicians down there who are just like, yeah, no, but we have to keep Dutch, you know, our kids are going to the Netherlands and they're going to learn, and now they're going to be able to interact with people without speaking Dutch. And, you know, it's just, it has a long history, you know, and that history is violent in that sense. You know, it's this idea of Papiamentu was stamped out of education because of Dutch. And by forcing kids to sort of learn this, I don't think it does them a good service, because how many kids are learning Dutch? Yes, you do get a very small percentage who learn Dutch well and they're out there and they end up going to universities. And unfortunately, people take that small percentage and say, well, you know, if these 5% of kids can learn it, basically the rest of you guys are doing something wrong, without thinking critically, like maybe what we're doing in education is wrong and we need to approach it differently, you know. And I remember speaking to someone once about it, and they said, you know, it's interesting because a lot of the kids of Latino immigrants who are coming in, or even Latino immigrant children who are coming in, you know, they have to learn Dutch because our school is still in Dutch, predominantly in Dutch. She's like, well, you know, they tend to learn Dutch much more easily than these kids who speak Papiamentu as their native tongue, and you know, I just don't understand why. And I'm like, you know, I wanted to tell her, well, think about it, because they're learning Dutch through their primary language. They're learning Dutch through Spanish. You're teaching kids Dutch as if that was their primary language, that was their mother tongue. And the reality is, it's a foreign tongue. You know, Dutch is not present on the island at all, outside from, you know, one newspaper that still continues to write in Dutch for some inane reason.
Shout out to that newspaper.
You know,
real strong.
and you know, you still have some government entities that are still really strongly about Dutch, but these things are changing. And even in the schools, I mean, you can tell, I've heard that teachers get frustrated where, you know, they're teaching these kids in Dutch and these kids have no idea what they're saying. You know, they get a sense, yes, because they're growing up learning Dutch in school, but after a while, the teachers just switch to Papiamentu because they're just like, listen, these kids need to learn this at the end of the day. And, you know, it's interesting because you brought up the social media and the internet, and the one thing that I always comment on is this idea of these languages are being written in a way that they've never been written before. And the reason why I say that, and being written at a rate that they weren't written before, and I think that's how I want to clarify this, because if we think about what the internet is and what it has done for Creole languages, think about before Twitter, before Facebook, how many people were actively writing in their own languages? You know, yeah, they might write a letter here and there, maybe an email here and there, but Facebook, Twitter, you know, you have these people that are not only using this language, and for us, because we're a very multilingual society, you do have a lot of kids who write in English as well, but they're making that active choice to also use Papiamentu, and they're making that active choice about sticking to a particular orthography, you know, and I think that's sort of where, at least in my research work and what I'm seeing, that's where I think the direction is going. This idea that kids are like, okay, they are subconsciously thinking, I'm gonna write this Facebook status or whatever in Papiamentu, and I'm making the conscious choice to use the tilde over the N instead of NJ in Hanya, for example, you know, or making sure that, you know, when you said when, you know, it reminds me all the time of how people write certain words and how they'll write it within like a Dutch orthography, especially older people tend to write certain words as if it was Dutch. And then you have these kids who are just like, well, no, I'm gonna write it this way because this sounds more correct, you know. And they might not be having these conversations on Facebook, but the act of just doing it alone is powerful in and of itself, and is sort of in place of that conversation. They don't need to have the conversation because they're doing it, you know. And I think that's sort of where it's going. So.
Winnie, in your question, you mentioned history. If history has taught us anything about Haiti, is that Haitians are heroes. And for me,
Can we hashtag
for me, it's the pride that comes with speaking the language of our ancestors. Knowing what they stood for, knowing that they were sending aid to other countries to, you know, free them from slavery. So, you know, I had uncles that would tell me, and my mother, that Creole at one time, if you were caught speaking Creole in the street, you would sometimes get beat up because it was, or, you know, I'm gonna say it in Creole, but Creole c'est langue habitant. So for me, and being raised by an activist, as I'm hearing, you know, having this conversation with you all, I realized how much of an activist my grandmother was. And we were, you know, I was going to Haiti, embargoes, coup d'etats, I was in Haiti. So for me, being a history buff and loving my culture, speaking the language brings me pride. And always remembering what my ancestors stood for. So despite anything I see in the media, despite anything that tries to make us feel so small, I know that Creole is some kind of, is activism. And, you know, we have a lot of scholars that are fighting to make Creole the language of instruction, especially in the science, technology.
Michel de Graaf.
Yeah, especially, yeah. And that's amazing. I remember asking Winnie, but especially in science, do these words exist on Creole? And they do. So one thing that bothers me is when a child is learning French in school and they go home to a parent that only speaks Creole, how are they supposed to help them with their homework? You know, so these are things that I think when a debate between French and Creole, these are things that we have to speak about. These are things that we have to acknowledge. And again, for me personally, it's activism. Creole is my activism.
I just wanted to interject, I'm sorry to cut off, but it just really reminded me of conversations that I had about Papiamentu as well, because I remember that was one of the things that last Christmas, you know, because my parents tell everybody what I do, everyone always has an opinion.
Proud.
You know,
You sound like a Haitian family.
Oh, we are. You know, and but unfortunately that also means that everybody feels the need to tell me their opinion about what Papiamentu is and whether it's right or wrong. And, you know, they're just like, I remember when somebody told me, no, you should have a dissertation chapter on this. And she proceeded to tell me what I should put in my dissertation. But, you know, one of the conversations that I had with this particular woman was this idea of like, oh, but why, you know, I think it's great that these kids are learning Papiamentu, but remember, we don't have science textbooks and math textbooks and these words in Papiamentu. Why would we go and do that? And you know, I told her like, no, we do have these things. And she's like, yeah, but how readily available are they? I'm like, well, you know, because people don't want to fund these things because they think they don't exist is the reason why we don't have these things. You know, and I think that is the important thing, because if we think, you know, I've been talking about socialization, if we think about how that generation was raised, in particular, you talked about Haitian Creole and the men being beat up if they spoke Haitian Creole. You know, it was the same in Aruba and Curacao, not necessarily in the streets, but in school. You know, they had nuns and brothers and, you know, basically religious order who came from the Netherlands and Suriname, who only spoke Dutch, had no desire to learn Papiamentu. So imagine, you know, and of course you guys can imagine that as a kindergartner going into school and hearing this language that sounds absolutely nothing like your own. You know, Papiamentu sounds like a mix between Spanish and Portuguese. Dutch sounds like Dutch, you know? And imagine like just going into that and having these teachers tell you like, listen, what you speak at home, that's not good. You can't speak that in school. Not only can you not speak it in the classrooms, but you cannot even speak it on the playground, you know? And that was, I from my parents, I hear these stories about how if they were caught, that word caught, talking Papiamentu or speaking in Papiamentu on the playground, they either got beat by these authority figures or they were told to write in Dutch several times on the boards, I do not speak that language, I do not speak that language. You know, and what does that do? How do we sort of, I'm going to make up this word because that's what academics do. How do we desocialize adults from that in order for them to tell their kids, well, what you speak has value. It's okay for you to learn in that language. It's okay for you to become an astrophysicist because you learned about physics or whatever in Papiamentu first. You know, and I think that's we're talking about children, but we can't lead the children without having adults understanding that as well.
Yep.
So
I'm just gonna tag along. It's so fascinating to hear you talk about this because it sounds like there's this similarity in all the islands where we can't get it together. We can't unite and agree, like, this is our language, this is what it is, and this is what we're going to represent. Because again, to go back to the Creole and households not really even speaking French and being able to help, I know a lot of people aren't going to be happy to hear this, but I know fewer Haitians who speak fluent, perfect French than I know. You know, like, a lot of my Haitian friends don't really speak French. And we make mistakes all the time, and we sound crazy to French speakers because that's not our language. It's the language of the colonizer, of the oppressor. And I mean, it's beautiful to have French under your belt. It's very helpful. Educationally, you can go to Europe and in Montreal. We were in Montreal recently for a performance, and I was so excited to get up there and speak in Creole. But all my friends are like speaking this weird Quebecois French that I was not down for, and I'm not gonna speak that with you. And someone said to me that I should really make an effort to show off my French when I get on stage and say a few words. I'm like, no, I'm not going to. Why should I? I understand that they're living there and they have to communicate in that language, but when you have the opportunity to, not break bread, but like to converse in your mother tongue, seize that opportunity and show it off because it's beautiful. It's a gift. It's unique. No one else speaks it. It's raw. It's everything that we are. Français, no. There are plenty of other countries, speaking it, and let's leave that to them. I hope that we can unite on that front. And it's so interesting that you said also that it's very political, because I feel like in Haiti as well, there's just like always these new debates, these new theories, and I think this and my way is better, and I hope that we can really unite and decide on one way of reading and writing and push that, and then just really agree to speak it openly, not in the homes or on the streets. And I know that it is taught in schools in Haiti, and I know that there are more universities here that have programs, and I'm so happy to see that, and I commend you for the work that you're doing, Whitney, because it's so important, as we all know. But that's just the bit that I wanted to say, is that I'm very happy that you're doing this.
Thank you. I think the change, so when I first started the Haitian Creole Language Institute, my mom was like, Keisha? She was like, what? You're gonna do what? I mean, my training, I'm a trained linguist, so I mean, that's what I do. So it's no surprise that I would end up doing something language related, but to this day, my mom is still not quite sure what it is I do. But to her credit, she is writing more and more on Creole. And that press is what I think we need to do. We need to not be afraid to really press others and encourage other people to question their socialization, because everything is on purpose. Not having schools being taught on Creole is on purpose. Making sure that people who are in positions of authority speak French is on purpose. Making sure that the vast majority of Haitians don't have access to politics and government and official documents because they're all in a language that they don't read and write is on purpose. So when we talk about Creole and make sure we have the same orthography, all of these conversations are really important, but we have to also be able to press those people who are in our lives. So I always tell people that activism starts with the people who are around you. So for me, my activism started with Mama Chérie, letting her know, like, okay, you don't want me to teach Creole, fine, Creole c'est bagay habitant. Okay, c'est supposé, c'est pas supposé. So it's like, so it's like, but I press her. I press her to really ask herself, well, nous parlons Creole at home, so why shouldn't my daughter be teaching, Creole? Really asking what are quite obvious questions to some, but not so obvious to others. So I'm gonna actually open up, because we could talk for hours. I know y'all could listen for hours, but I'm gonna open up questions to the audience. Yes, Nadej. Yes. Okay, question.
Good evening, everyone. Hey. It's been a very interesting conversation. The question I wanted to ask, do you feel the push for these languages, for the official usage of them, do you think the diaspora has a lot to do with it, or is most of the work happening in the homeland and on the ground, or is it kind of like both of them are like pushing to make that happen?
That's a good question.
I'll start. Our diaspora is very small, very, very small. In terms of Papiamentu, we have less than 400,000 speakers worldwide. And the majority of those speakers are on the island. I think for us, we have a bit of an advantage on the island because we do have a higher standard of living, which translates to having a larger amount of people finishing school, going to universities, coming back. And I think that's where a lot of our activism, in a sense, has started and sort of flourished. For us, it started within and sort of flourished out. And that has a lot to do with people on the ground itself saying, well, wait a minute, no, what we do speak is a language like, Frank Martinez Arion, who, we call him the father of Papiamentu. He unfortunately recently died last year, but he was such a big proponent of Papiamentu, and he wrote so much on it, and he wasn't the one to start the conversation. There were plenty of people who were already starting the conversation, but he propelled it forward. And you have people like Marta Daykoff, who, that woman, just anything that you need to know, she can break it down like that. Her dissertation was on the grammatical structure of Papiamentu. And you have people like Joyce Pereira and Ramon Tortandre in Aruba as well, who they're pushing for it, but unfortunately they're older. And because we're such a small island, we do have a lot of political infighting. So they have their ideas about how language should move forward, and unfortunately they get a lot of pushback, and they're tired. So I think a lot of it, they're still out there trucking along and they're fighting for it, and it's great. But it's time for some of us who are younger to kind of like pick up the ball, to pick up that ball and to continue moving that game forward. So, like I said, it started for us, at least it started on the ground, and it's sort of coming out now.
I think that the push is coming from, for Haitian Creole, I think that the push is coming from both the diaspora and the people on the ground. But it might be more vocal in the diaspora because of how we have access to resources that those people on the ground might not have. And I think it's important to talk about facts. So, for example, the majority of Haitian people speak Creole. That's like uncontested. That's like a fact. Given that fact, it's strange that our educational system is not in Haitian Creole. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's pressed to really look at that would admit that, that's kind of like, well, why aren't we taught in the language that we speak? So whether or not the push is coming from Haitians who are on the ground in IT, who might not even know that they're being oppressed still by not having access to their language in schools, I think it's important that that press happens anyway, because in the diaspora we have access to resources that can help in a way that might be more impactful than those who are on the ground who might not have that same access.
I think that, to answer your question, Nadej, I think this is by observation. I think that when a lot of Haitians come to the United States or they go to Canada or France, when they're in Haiti, it's easy to buy into the idea that, the more French you know, the better you're off. And then when they come here, it's almost like, oh, my culture is, beautiful. And I think that
it's popping.
It is popping. It's colorful. And that specifically happened to my uncle. He was all about the Beatles in Haiti. He was, very Eurocentric. And he came here and it was all about like, boy. And, it's, I think there's a shift that also happens when leaving Haiti and buying into the idea that Europe, French, or English, American English, which is not a language, but is better. And then when you get here and you don't know the language, you can't speak in English, and then you're interfacing with your family and friends in Creole, there's more shift to embrace it and tell people and, become an activist for the language. Mm-hmm. So that's more on a social scale.
Yeah, I would say that I agree with your response that it is on both ends. However, I think that there is a big movement in Haiti also, because as I said before, I took the certificate in Creole, and I believe that was the first year that it was actually required. And I remember feeling so proud that I was part of this new movement, essentially, where it wasn't even a choice. Like, you have to take the class and you have to pass it in order to go on to the next grade. So I think that there is a lot of work happening, but again, the whole concept of divide and conquer is what's happening in all these small islands where we can't seem to just get on the same page to move forward as a unit. But I do think that that's a very good point, that when you come stateside, that you have more of an incentive or an inspiration to rep your flag or to rep your culture. So you do like put forth, your best Creole and you your flag and all of that. But I think that I mean, as much as I would love to take all the credit and be like, yeah, diaspora is only pushing for Creole, there are a lot of intellectuals in Haiti who are working very hard to make sure that it is pushed forward. And it kills me still that to this day I meet people. I met someone just the other day and I told them that I was from Haiti, and they're like, oh, what's that, French, right? And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, it's Creole and French, but French is always the first reference because that's the official language, unfortunately.
And I think it would be important. I think it's important to also recognize the work of the Académie Creole Haïtienne, the Haitian Creole Academy, that was founded in winter of 2014, and it's a group of Haitian scholars and academics and authors and educators and linguists based on the ground in Haiti who are doing really great work that should be carefully monitored. I'll say this for the record because we don't want to go the way of the French Academy. But very, very great work nonetheless, in that there's a constant promotion of Creole, but also, again, from what I said before, a structured space where people know they can go and ask and get research and engage in a way that leads to that more positive promotion.
Question? There's a question in the back.
Hello, hi. So please follow me with my question. So, my family is from Ghana, right? I love my Haitian people, right? And I don't speak my home language. My mom speaks one language. My father speaks another language. So anytime I live in a Ghanaian community, so anytime I meet Ghanaian folks and they find out I'm from Ghana, right? They ask me, what does your mom speak, or what does your family speak? And I say I tell them the language, but I tell them I don't speak. The first thing they say is, your mom didn't teach you the language. Your mom didn't teach you. It's always your mom, right? And so I find interesting the idea of mother tongue, to focus on, I want to say, the feminine energy, and it makes me think, what role does gender play in sort of fortifying the culture, fortifying the language, how young boys and young girls are socialized to sort of make room for learning the language.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on that because when I saw this hashtag, I was very, I was a little conflicted because it is my father's tongue, technically, but it's true that the saying is mother's tongue because lang mama. But for me, my mom played a huge role in pushing me in the direction of really fully absorbing the Haitian culture. So I have her to thank for that. But I think that that's a very good point that you raise. Your mother tongue, obviously that's, who birthed you and essentially raises most of us. So I think that that is so interesting because I was reflecting on that as well. I was like, do I fit the profile? Can I technically rep this hashtag? Can I say mother tongue? But that's very, what were the two languages that your parents, if you don't mind?
My mom is Edda and my father's Fanti.
Oh, wow.
And they're completely different.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I
understand
Bissy. Yeah.
It's so funny. So over the summer in Curacao, there has been sort of this debate going on about what do we call ourselves, because in Papiamentu, and the reason why I'm saying this, because in Papiamentu there's a term, we don't, you say like in Aruba it's Arubiano. In Curacao, the way to call us is you corso, which literally translates to child of Curacao. So there's been sort of this big debate going on where a lot of people are like, I hate that because, you know, we're not Yuditera, we weren't born from the ground, so why would we call ourselves that? Nobody else in the world calls themselves a child of Curacao. You know, we should be Curisoleño or something like that. And I remember someone saying, well, you know, that's Spanish, that's not Papiamentu, so where are you going with that? You know, and it sort of became this whole sort of conundrum because the reality is you say both, and you also say Curaçaoan as well, which is the English form, and nobody's trying to take any of them away, but it became this huge debate about, well, we shouldn't be calling ourselves Yudi Corso because nobody else in the world calls themselves a child of anything. And I was like, well, you know, at the end of the day, and I had brought that up, that, you know, what we talk about our mother tongue and our fatherland, you know, and we talk about nationhood in these terms of parental units. And I remember, you know, my father's watching right now, so I'm going to call him out. I remember going into, you know, he and I having this argument about this, because I'm like, I'm all for, you know, you corso, because I'm all about, yeah, pride, you know, maybe because I didn't grow up there. And he's just like, no, it's curisoleño, that's the correct term. And it's I don't know, for me, it's just, I look at it this way, like, even if you didn't grow up on the island itself, these island nations shaped you. It wasn't just your parents who shaped you, it's these nations itself. Yes, you weren't born from the ground, but maybe I would say metaphorically you were, you know. That language, that culture, it comes from those lands. So yeah, I am a child of Curacao. You know, I'm an American, yes, but I am a child of Curacao because Curacao raised me in that sense. So.
Oftentimes when I see, when scholars speak about Haiti, Haiti's often referred to mama, or the woman who, you know, nurtured us and, you know, gives us all this, you know, these great things. And I don't know how many of you have heard Potomita, Fisi Potomita. So it's the central pole that, you know, holds everything up. And if women are the ones essentially in the home raising children, you know, they're transferring their culture to their children. And feminine energy, to answer your question, is powerful in that sense. We're the carriers of culture. We are, you know, while a lot of parents may raise their kids speaking English, when they're upset, they'll express that in Creole. And I think that's primarily the reason. But I think that's why our culture has more of a feminine energy, because we often are the ones, you know, keeping our culture alive. Not to say that men are not as well, but
We pass it on.
yeah, but we literally, you know, give birth and we're transferring that culture over.
I always tell people, every time I go to Haiti, everything is fine. I have asthma in New York. I breathe perfectly fine in Haiti. I break out all over. My skin clears out the second I step on the land of IET. In the wintertime, I have like my heels. I don't know what happens. My skin is just, everything is perfect. As soon as I touch that land, I feel like I'm home. Like the land recognizes me and says, okay, child, you are home. Here's that nurture that you need. Let me take care of all those ailments that being elsewhere has done. You know, it just feels so good. And I think that the land giving birth to us is more than metaphorical. I think there's really a physical connection that happens. And the term Potomita, I think is super important because women are often viewed as the Potomita in Haitian culture, and it's through women, often through my grandmother, my mother, my aunties. I have so many mata who are cousin, but really mata. You know, it's through these women that we've maintained a connection to our culture. So I think that gender does play a large role. I think that, Riva, you mentioned your mom, she was really mindful in making sure that you had access to IT, but mindful because she knew that, you know, there was, if there was no mindfulness involved, that you could just not be exposed to Haitian culture. So I think that the gender playing the role, which is why I constantly find myself surrounded by Haitian women. I don't do it on purpose, but I have in recent years started to do it on purpose because it just happens so naturally in how I engage with the Haitian community.
And your niece.
And my little niece and Nana. I love Nana. Shout out to Nana. I don't know if she's watching, but
Thank you. I just want to point something out that about Riva growing up in Haiti and my experience there, and it's a question. Excuse me. We were very fortunate to know Professor Bryant Freeman from the University of Kansas, and every year he wrote several Creole dictionaries and was the expert and has a Creole Institute. But what was so fascinating was, and because Creole is a living and growing language, that's why I'm asking this question. He would come every year. He would send me an email, get ready. It wasn't my responsibility. He had a few people throughout the society he always checked in with. But my boyfriend at the time and I, he started checking in with us too. What did he want? The new words. The new Creole words. Because advertisements, new products, new experiences, all these things create new words. So like where people were saying Clorox, you know, meaning hunger, you know, that's a new word. So I'm wondering, huh?
I don't know that.
Yes, he used to come every year and we'd meet him at the Olufsen and then he'd say, come on, give me the words, give me the words. And that's what he did, collected the words and brought them back for the students, you know, and to incorporate them in his ever evolving, growing Creole dictionary, which he's not doing anymore. So I'm just wondering who is doing that. I mean, there were so many things, like for example, I mean, a very classic example would be what you call a camera in Creole, which would be Kodak. Yeah, of course. So when we were doing Li Li Li, which was having Haitians, training them to read out loud storybooks in Creole in the tent camps, we were really looking also for the current jargon, the current songs, the jingles on television and radio that they're now using in their everyday life. And so the new words that were out there. So I'm just wondering who is now going to Haiti on a regular basis, gathering these new words.
Well, I don't have a direct answer, but it's interesting that the few words that you mentioned are actually English words that are being used in Haiti, because in my experience when we most recently went, the slang in Haiti is very much like Crinklish. It's a lot of English infused into the dialogue. So obnoxious. But like it's interesting, like gudu gudu, that's a new word, because that's like the word that they used to describe the earthquake, because they didn't have a word to describe it. But I'm not sure who has the answer as far as who is doing that research, but I'll challenge you all to perhaps make an effort to apply the less used words. Like Movolino is full of words all the time. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, you don't know this word? And I'm like, no, I don't, because it's not the really deeper words that exist. Many people don't know. I wish that perhaps someone would put together a body of work with like the rare words that mean so many things, but that are not used in everyday language, because now the thing in Haiti is to use English words as a a Creole expression.
not just in Haiti though.
No, I just wanted to say, it's funny because I love those new terms that a lot of these people are coming up with. I just love them, and I encourage them a lot, mainly because I think it upsets so many purists, Papiamentu purists, who are just like, oh, our language. And I'm just like, language is forever changing, it's okay. You know, I mean, exactly, like, for example, our word for sneakers is skets. And where does that word come from? The Keds, the brand Keds, and now when you hear kids speak, like they do speak with a lot of English and the different words. I remember when Blackberries were so in, everybody had a Blackberry, and when they would message each other, they'll say something like, hey, okay, me tabay pengbo. And I'm like, bang, what the hell is bang? You know, and I knew that they meant that, you know, I'm going to message you, but I'm like, where are they getting this word bang? And I'm like, oh, because when the BlackBerry would sound, it was ping, you know, so.
They had the
Yeah,
pin.
they had the pin.
Where
Yeah.
when you message someone through BlackBerry,
called
it was
ping, right?
you were pinging them.
Yeah.
You didn't have BlackBerry, so you didn't know.
No, but you know, it's these words that are coming out, and now, you know, WhatsApp is the in thing for everybody. So they're just like, hey, okay, me to buy app, you know. So they're not saying, they're finding these ways, and you know, I don't know how conscious they are that they're doing this, but I mean, it's constantly have been like that. Like, for example, something that I had noticed last year while working on a paper for a class was this phrase, at all, you know. And it's from English, at all. And I never clicked in my mind because everybody uses that phrase. This is not something that's new. It's been there for a while. And, you know, it never clicked in my mind that that was an English phrase. It wasn't until I was working on this paper that I was like, hold up, is there a Papiamentu version for this? And, you know, I tried translating it literally, and I was just like, no, there is no Papiamentu version at all for that particular phrase. And it was this idea of like, well, yeah, adults as well as children, you know, they're creating these phrases, and, you know, I've been hearing that people now are trying to, I like to call it papimentize these types of words in terms of the writing. So, you know, how do we represent at all on paper, or do we write it as at all in English, or do we write it, you know, in a way that works well in Papiamentu? So, you know, I love these words, and I think that's the fear a lot with our Creole languages, because, you know, I was reading this paper before I got here that was actually written by my advisor, and, you know, the paper was discussing how Creole languages often are not in the conversation when it comes to endangered languages. You know, we always tend to think of endangered languages like, oh, let's go save that really obscure Native American language, you know, but we never think about, oh, let's go save that French Creole that was spoken in Trinidad or in Grenada or wherever. And I think that's the fear for a lot of us who do speak these Creole languages, you know, the major ones like Papiamentu, like Haitian Creole, like this idea that, you know, if we quote unquote allow too much English or Spanish or anything French, even whatever, especially English, because, you know, a lot of people like to see English as the language killer. If we allow too much English to come in, is it going to eventually kill our language? Who's going to save it? You know, and why should we save it if we already have this contested notions about if it's really important or not? So I think that's where a lot of that fear comes from, and I'm fearful of that too. I mean, I'm always constantly talking about, yeah, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, but at the end, I'm like, well, you know, if they're creating these new words, then let them. If these new words, if at all, you know, is now entered into that consciousness, or what is it, alright, you know, for all right, you know, if these are entering into that consciousness, just like, I'm gonna start embracing it and saying, no, but that is Papiamentu. It is not English. It's Papiamentu, you know, and let's push it in that positive way of saying, well, yeah, okay, well, let's find a way to write that in Papiamentu, and let's make it a Papiamentu word, because, I mean, computer didn't exist before, the 1980s, 1970s, but we say computer now, you know, that's completely fine. So I say, let's encourage them, but let's encourage them in a way that promotes the language. Let's find a way to write it in our language. You know?
I think that there are people, there are individual pockets of people doing that kind of work, compiling sort of new slang and new words. I think that on a larger scale, social media is doing that for us. So we don't need, you know, we don't necessarily need right now some dictionary on, you know, the etymology of blah blah, although that would be amazing. But there are people like Patrick Sylvain who are working on dictionaries that focus on more obscure Creole words that have more of an African origin than a French origin. There are scholars within the Académie Creole Haïtienne that are doing work particularly on that. But I think that, again, it comes back to this idea of, you know, having like one dedicated space where this work can happen. And I think with the Académie Creole, that's starting to happen. I think with the schools that are doing more work with children on Creole and IT, that's starting to happen. I think with more places of higher ed in the States and other places in the diaspora, like NYU, that are teaching Creole, that's starting to happen. So there are pockets of people all over who are doing that kind of work, but there has not been yet a concerted, unified effort the way that has been for maybe endangered languages, like Native American languages, where you have like a solid group of people working in unison to compile the work that the work and the aspects of language that are changing constantly. I think we have time for one more question, and then we can talk about how we're moving on from here.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
I was born in Haiti, and I went to school in Haiti. And one thing I've noticed is that wherever you went that was an official place, whether it's the police station, whether it's an office, whether the office was big or small, they spoke French.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you guys is, do you guys think that the lack of push for Creole or Papiamentu to be taught in school is somehow tied to economic opportunity? Because if I have a child and I know that if this is what you learn in school, when you go out to get a job, you're not going to find anything because you're unable to speak the language that's officially in every office. Why would I want to encourage you to learn that? Even though I love my language, but I want my child to live a better life.
That's a great question.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's important to learn both. While I'm all about singing Creole, and I definitely understand where you're coming from, but oftentimes I hear that it's either one or the other. It shouldn't be one or the other. I think it should be everything. If you want your child to learn Spanish, Spanish is a growing language. It opens up doors for you. And what I think Winnie is doing, and a lot of scholars, we're all doing, is trying to create something, a space where we're all included, where everything is inclusive, not exclusive. So, books in Creole, it's all about creating those things, or so we can include ourselves in it. So I am in no capacity a parent, but I know for me, learning Spanish in school, because I wasn't allowed to learn French because I was Haitian, so they felt like I was cheating, and that was not even true. Creole helped me understand Spanish better, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It does.
So I was getting 96, and I think I got a 96 in the Regents, but that's only because I had the Creole foundation, and it varies. Spanish varies in the islands or different countries, but for example, I remember goat, for example, where a little goat was cabrito, and I remember coming across that word, and I'm like, I don't know what it means, but I think it's goat, because in the Creole we say cabrit, and I'm like, oh, that's what it means. And I often do that. So now when when I'm with my Spanish coworkers, or I understand everything that they're saying. I'm with my Italian coworkers, I understand most of what they're saying because of that Creole. So the idea that it has to be one or the other, I think it's a beautiful thing when we can teach our kids both, and they can in turn learn how to balance both cultures without having to feel like, Creole is less than. And it's an opportunity for me to have a better life, because I think that's more true in Haiti, because oftentimes children do not have the opportunity to learn French or Spanish. But here, I think raising a child here, you're open to, the internet, like you said, or Facebook, you're seeing different languages, and you're curious to know what it means. And story time, so I went to Haiti in August, and I'm in Miraguan. And, in the provinces, oftentimes the motorcycles are the ones that are, transporting people. And a young Haitian guy was just like, for nous together, oui, parce que si nous pas get tête ensemble, n'a get beef. And I'm like, I'm in the countryside.
Wow.
I'm in the countryside, and Creole is changing, but I think that it's always, there are trending words that will no longer be relevant. Perhaps in 5 years or maybe tomorrow. And so I think it's important to identify those languages. I think gudu is going to stay. So I think that should be included if someone is curating all these words, to include that in there. But it was just, you hear trends in the capital, but oftentimes when you go in the countryside, nobody knows, what's going on in the capital, but the language is changing in the countryside as well. And that to me scares me a little bit. Because I find myself speaking more pure Creole than than my Haitian counterparts and family.
I wanted to say that I think it's absolutely a part of why there is such a push against Creole languages in schools, because I feel like there is this notion that, or there has been this prevailing notion, it's not something that I feel, but there has been this idea of, well, if we teach these kids in these languages, they're going to get farther ahead than in their mother tongue. Because it's this fear that, well, if we just teach them in their mother tongue, they're not going to go anywhere. We, like I said, in Aruba, Curacao, Bonaire, there's less than 400,000 speakers worldwide. So this is fear of like, well, if they only know Papiamentu, where are they going to go? Who are they going to interact with? And, the reality is this. I mean, there's been so many studies done that show that if a child is taught in their mother tongue, they're going to get farther ahead, and not just taught the sciences, but even taught another language. How do you go and teach a child Dutch as if Dutch is their primary language? So teach them Dutch through Dutch if they don't know any Dutch. There is going to be those 1-2 kids who succeed, because there's always a kid who's going to succeed. But the majority of those kids are not going to succeed, and I think that's really sort of where that conundrum is. So, it's this idea of starting to change these ideologies, saying that it's okay, let's work on these languages, let's put them in education. And they have been doing it, particularly on the islands. I know in Aruba they have this project called Escola Multilingual, which is this multilingual school. It's a pilot project that they've been doing where the kids are not only taught in Dutch, but they're taught in Papiamentu as the primary language, and then throughout the day they get immersed in Dutch, English, and Spanish. So, because those 3 languages are very much present on the island. Spanish and English a lot more than Dutch. Dutch is not that much present on either of the islands, but it's this idea of like, well, yes, tourism is our biggest economy, so in Aruba especially, we have a lot of American tourists. They're going to need to communicate with them. And for me, I always say, maybe this is I don't think it's premature for me to say, but this is my opinion, that English is fine. These kids are they're not learning English in school. Over the summer, I remember one of the questions that I was asking a lot of these kids was, okay, well, when is the first time that you heard English? When is the first time you heard Spanish? Or when is the first time you started realizing what these languages were, and when did you actually learn it? And the majority, I will say 98% of these kids were like, well, I actually learned English through Discovery Kids, watching Discovery Kids in Disney.
That's what my niece is learning.
Yeah, and or watching YouTube videos. And these kids, when you hear them speak English, they speak English with an American accent. So clearly they're not learning it in school. And the same thing with Spanish. I asked them, this is hilarious to me. I'm like, yeah, where's the first time you heard Spanish? And they're like, well, like either my housekeeper or my grandmother, they watch a lot of telenovelas on Venevisión, so, that's where I learned Spanish. And it's like, I'm just imagining what they're learning from these telenovelas, but it's this idea of like, they're not learning you know, they're not being exposed the first time to these languages. The only language that they are exposed to for the first time in school is Dutch, which says something. You know, I don't know about Haiti and where they're being exposed to for French for the first time, but I think that says something about our relationship with Dutch as opposed to our relationship with English and Spanish. And for me, I'm like, yeah, you know, I understand this need of like, oh yeah, we have to push English in schools, but I'm like, English is gonna be fine because these kids are learning English whether you're trying to push it or not, because they're not learning English in school. They're not learning, yes, may I go to the bathroom or can I go to the bathroom? They're learning it from watching Discovery Kids and Disney and later on MTV and BET. They're learning it from hearing Rick Ross songs, you know? So it's happening, and you know, I think that fear, I'm not saying it's unfounded because it's a very real fear, but I think the reality is very different from what that fear is. I think a lot of that fear stems from how many of their parents grew up, in the sense of like, well, we are close to South America, so we got a lot of Hispanic music, you know, we were exposed to a lot of salsa, merengue, and whatever. So yeah, our Spanish is okay, our English not so much. It depends on how much exposure we got to it, but you know, I'm fearful that my child is not going to get that. And it's like, well, your child has a very different experience than you have growing up, and you know, once that's thoroughly acknowledged, I think that's maybe ideologies might start to change. So.
And I think that the answer to your question has to do about changing the ideology. And so when we were talking before, I'll say this really briefly, about how things are done on purpose. It's on purpose that these places of these institutions like banks and offices, it's on purpose that they speak French. It was because you need, in order to dehumanize a group of people, you have to let them know that the language that they speak is not a real language. You have to let them know that the religion that they practice is not a good religion. You have to let them know that, you know, the darker their skin is, the worse that they are. You have to teach them these ideologies so that now they themselves can start to perpetuate those ideologies. So I think that, fine, teach both languages, you know, teach your child French, that's great, but Haitians don't really speak French, and we need to really talk about what does that mean. What does it mean that for me, I was raised in a Haitian household, but c'est créole me parler, pas français. I can say some words in French, I can repeat what I've heard, like stock phrases that I've heard growing up, même pas parler français. What does that mean? So I think that part of the conversation when you do hear people say, and in Haiti too, like I go to Haiti and tell people, même si l'on mwen lou, ma pa pren moun Creole. And they're like, what do you mean? Oh, c'est diaspora, oh yeah, ma pa pren moun Creole. I'm like, well, but at least I'm claiming the language that gave birth to me. And I think that part of shifting those ideologies is when you do hear people say, oh, well, you know, my kid might not get a job because he or she doesn't speak français, that the pushback has to now be, well, you know, what does it mean that French is only in these spaces? Why isn't it in other spaces? And it's a hard conversation to have, because when you have an ideology that's so deeply ingrained that the people that I argue with the most about Creole, en Creole, c'est haïtien. En Creole, n'a discuté. It's like, it's almost like, but we talking in Creole right now. Like, what do you mean? So it's a hard conversation to have. We're gonna take one last question.
Not really a question. Someone has a question.
Oh, so if someone has a question, we can take one last question before we break.
Was it a question? Oh, okay.
Oh.
No,
All right, no,
I
I
thought someone else had a question.
Okay.
No, as someone who's recently started traveling to Haiti, because I wrote a book on Haitian cuisine, so my experience with Haiti really came from that book. But I'm sorry, I don't know the gentleman's name, but it is very specific, as you said, Whitney, because when I do a brunch in Haiti, first thing I have to say is, so, excusez-moi, you know, moi pas parler français, and it's all, you know, and I don't say it like it's an excuse, like I say it, excuse me, because that's what they expect. The expectation is you're this academic, you're supposed to, the only reason they forgive me, by the way, is because I am from America, and I do have a Columbia degree, so it's okay. You know, and they tell you that in these spaces, so it's really hard because, like you said, your argument it's mainly with Haitians who don't even speak French, but you can almost understand because they see the opportunities they don't have. So they know there is a stark difference between not having that French. They experience it on their daily lives. So that's why they are the machin, the this, the that. So of course they're pushing for their kids to learn French. And like you said, that brainwashing has taken place, and in order for their, you know, for their kids to enter these spaces, it has to be like, you have to be that difference. You can't be like me. So just seeing it, I think more so than Aruba, like you're saying, where people do have a standard of living that's a little bit more across the board. I think in Haiti, though, the difference is stark. Like it's almost like you don't see too many poor people that don't speak French, you know? You're not going to see too many, you know, like, and then you go into the colorism and all of that into it, like it's all connected. Like I have my friends from OCAP, they'll tell you that. Nous déjà noirs, but au moins nous parlons français. You know, so that was how she grew up. Like she couldn't speak Creole in her household. She actually said that she had to learn Creole on the playground with her kids in the barn and everything like that because her parents specifically did not want her to speak Creole because they knew like the French was going to be that thing that made the difference to them.
Can I add something?
Yes, we'll add one more comment.
Yeah, and just in terms of like, I know when we moved back to the States and Riva heard me talking, and she said, "Mom, those words don't exist." But in fact they did, but I was working in an adult professional level in Haiti, speaking Creole, where everybody was speaking Creole, and she was not at that level or in that profession. So yes, it's so important that the dictionaries or the discussions around Creole include more adult and professional language, because the language does exist in a lot of fields. But maybe it's kept like a child language, and all the dictionaries are written like maybe for the Balan or something, I don't know. But it's very important that these words, I don't know, now that I'm thinking about these dictionaries, they're all very simplistic in a sense. I mean, I'm not really up on the current dictionaries. It's not fair to say.
They've gotten much better.
That's good, because there is a lot of professional language. I'm not in the biology field, so I don't know. But I've been in a lot of fields in Haiti and, using Creole.
That's great. Yeah, but a lot of the words also, and I found that in some of my recent translation work, is that a lot of the words are not technically Creole. They are like French words that we like interpret and spell in a Creole fashion. And I've had lots of debates with Movolino, and I'm like, that's how you say it. And he's like, that's not a word. Like, there are, just back to what we were saying before about certain terms that we may not know, but they exist, but they're said completely different, but we kind of like find shortcuts and just Creolize certain words, but really they're not real words. And I think maybe I'm not sure which words you're referring to. Maybe they're like more sophisticated terminology, but again, those words, I think there should be more emphasis on like how to write those more important textbooks, like for scientific terms and things of that nature. But not that I have a direct response to your question, but I love going to Haiti and encountering people in official places, and they're like talking in their fanciest French, and I like respond with like the rec Creole rec because it's so not expected, because it's inappropriate technically. It's unacceptable. It's like there's no place for that. And many of my friends, as I said, I was teaching my friends how to speak Creole because they were not exposed to it, because their parents wanted them to have an advantage so that they could succeed, so that eventually when they went on to go to university in France, and actually this friend that I'm thinking of in particular, she did end up going to university, but and in France. So I understand the duality, but yes, the importance of pushing forth both and having Creole under your belt as well as French, I think. And I'm sure my dad is rolling in his grave right now because he was a big advocate of French. He was a perfect French writer and reader. He was a lawyer, and in Haiti, you can't, you can't go into court with it just at this time. This is not where we're at yet. So professionals, obviously, yes, you have to have French, but I think that we need to just emphasize the importance of both.
Ooh. So, you all came to see several Black women speak, so of course we're way over time. First I want to say thank you to Keisha and Riva and Carmel. Thank you so much for your energy and your time and your willingness to have these sort of, fuzzy conversations about where we are and what we can do and how to move forward. I really appreciate that, and I thank you all for joining us tonight. So originally we had planned 2 professional development workshops where you could learn about certain things related to K-12 education. And we won't have time for those actual workshops. Instead, we will offer you the materials from those workshops so you can work with those materials on your own and provide you with contact information. So if you have any questions or if there's some feedback that you'd like to give us, I will let you know how to reach us there. So those materials will be available to you on your way out at the front desk. And let's see. I had some announcements that are completely leaving me right now. Let's see. I thanked everybody. I'll take the flowers. I'm sorry. So part of my movement this year is hashtag recentering Blackness. And this means supporting Black-owned businesses. So these flowers are from a Black-owned business in Brooklyn called Hibiscus Flower Shop. You can find them at hibiscusflowershop.com. The food that you ate, the pâté and the bon chocolat pays, right outside, coconut milk and organic milk. So I don't know, whatever that means. It's provided by Café L'Ouverture, which is a brand new Haitian bakery that just opened up last year in Bed-Stuy, Black owned. And that's it. I don't have any other announcements. There are books and CDs for sale out front by Riva. So you can purchase Anaëlle at La Sirène and also Perle de Culture. Okay,
yes.
I can't
That's
speak
French.
That French, yeah. That's French. French is a struggle for me.
That's French, yes.
I never formally studied French, so I'm always I'm in this weird space where Creole is my point of reference, and then I have to sort of I access French through Creole, so it's an interesting space for me. Definitely check out Carmel's website, portacademie.com. That has tons and tons of great information on Haitian studies and Haitian scholarly work, and continue to follow the work of Keisha. She's on her way to becoming Dr. Keisha. So definitely keep an eye out for her work, especially as it relates to Papiamentu, because I think having those structured spaces again, having a dissertation on Papiamentu, writing children's books on Creole, creating digital libraries about Haitian scholarly work, those structured spaces are super important to help us elevate these languages that we speak and desocialize the speakers of those languages so that we can get to a point that's so much more positive and also healthier for our communities. So, I always like to quote the great philosopher Sean Carter. What? Who's gonna fight me on this?
No one.
I have the mic. Okay. So, in the words of the great philosopher Sean Carter, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I super appreciate that. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Definitely make sure to follow Mother Tongues United, hashtag Mother Tongues United. follow hashtag Creoles at NYU. And also hashtag recentering blackness. That's my theme for this academic year. That means everything that I do means I'm putting Haiti at the center, I'm putting blackness at the center, and reminding everyone in every space that I navigate that I am a Black Haitian woman and I'm here for Black people. And that's it. VP, that's it.
That's it.
Merci.
That's a Creole expression.
To all of you.
Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you.